thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, cool. So you all know that the skin is the largest organ on the body. Tell me what you guys know about the skin so I don't waste my time.
Well, there's, what do you call it? God, I had it in my head. There's so much, it's hard to like pinpoint a specific thing. I guess in the context of tattoos, you're injecting the ink above the, below the second layer, I believe.
Into the second layer.
Into the second layer. And the tattoos stay because the white blood cells are coming in. They're holding on to the ink essentially because they're reacting to a foreign source and essentially keeps it there because they can't really get rid of it.
Right.
And that's sort of like the process that keeps them there, I believe.
Yeah, so ink is...
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I am so
Just leave it there.
Okay.
It's on us anyway. She's
Okay.
not here.
She's not here.
Right. So ink is just carbon, and we're made of carbon. So in Europe, they're having a little bit of a panic about putting ink into people's skin since there hasn't been any regulation for, hundreds of thousands of years. But we've been doing, as human beings, we've been tattooing as long as we've been making fires and creating ash. So, I'm guessing the first tattoo was an accident. Someone scratched themselves, and got some carbon in the wound, and all of a sudden there was a mark, and they're like, wow, this is cool. So that's all speculation on my part, but I don't think we were doing tattoos before we made fire. So it's rooted in who we are.
Yeah, but I'll just say, backing up a little to your original question of what do we know about the skin, there are a couple of membranes, right? Membrane is a thin sheet-like structure, and then the skin, there's a cutaneous membrane, which is the skin. And so remember the rough percentage of our body weight that the skin takes up? 16-ish% of our body our weight is the skin, and there's the three layers. There's the dermis and the epidermis, subcutaneous underneath, and that connects to the bone. Just a couple review items.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I have, if anybody has to, wants to remember, because we're going to give you an example on how deep you go when you tattoo. So this is a visual reference. So the top layer is the skin that you tend to slough off. It's dead officially. So when it's not dead, let's say I go in and I make a piece of art, I'm injecting the ink into the dermis. You go into the fatty layer down here, that's way too far. So if I see a little blood, that's good because this is just the end of the capillaries here. But if I don't go deep enough and I just stay in this layer, it'll just fall off, right? So when people get a tattoo, I'm creating friction, so basically a burn on this top layer, even though I'm putting it into this layer. So what happens is when you're healing up, 4 or 5 days into the tattoo, this whole layer is going to come off. It's just going to be like a bad sunburn. And when it comes off, it's perforated with all the ink, so it appears as if you've just lost your tattoo. A lot of people think that when they first get a tattoo and they've never had one, because then you start to grow up a new layer of skin over the tattoo, and when it's knitting up, it is white. It's like basically opaque. So the tattoo looks gray underneath. And then it officially becomes your dead protective layer when it dies. So that's like when you get lightly scratched, you just tickled instead of hurt, because it's officially dead. And then it'll slough off and start again. So it's this like constant process. And when so in Europe, they feel uncomfortable about what people are inserting into their skin, so they've developed some regulations that have totally changed the industry over there. That hasn't happened in America, partly because it's really not terribly dangerous. The samurai warriors actually, who were covered in tattoos, they've been doing autopsies on their bodies, and they found carbon in their lymph nodes. And so some of the ink did travel to their lymph nodes. And but it doesn't even matter because it's just carbon. It's just sitting there. It's an inert thing. It's doing nothing. It's just sitting. Also,
That's kind of interesting considering Japan is like one of the most against tattoo countries. Like
well,
there
that's
is-
why, because the criminals had them.
Yeah, because
Yeah. I think it's getting a little bit better. They have like shops you can go into, but they're in the seedy areas. And I did see a plastic surgery, like tummy tuck, where the woman had a full-on tattoo on her belly, and they cut her open, and they showed the lymph nodes, and the lymph nodes were completely black. And I don't know for sure, but I don't think it matters too much. Like, once again, it's just staining the organ, but it's not like engaging in any way, because it's just carbon, which is what we are. I might be wrong about that. In Europe, we'll know soon enough because they've changed industry so much. We're going to have a comparison. So, how long? When are you leaving? Just so I know how long we have.
We've got about half an hour.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Megan here is my apprentice, and before she can move on to tattooing anyone else, she has to tattoo herself several times, and that's what she's been doing. We show them your first. This is her first finished tattoo.
Actually, it's in the shiny gray layer.
Right. So she's growing new skin over it now, and you can see how it's crackly and white. Also, she just did this one, which means that she's getting really good, because that's an excellent tattoo there. So she's gotten good fast. She's been on my table for probably 100 hours before she asked to be my apprentice. So she knows a lot about how tattoos feel. She has them everywhere. So
What's the most like painful spot?
anywhere,
Like I heard it's really painful for the hands.
yeah, hands are intense, right? And then also where you're ticklish, so the ribs, or on your jugular vein, where if you get cut, you could die. So if it hurts a lot, that means you're, probably not supposed to be cutting yourself there. Inside of the wrist, same thing. So then it's really hard to get into here and into this area. It feels real soft and supple behind your neck, but as soon as I start to tattoo, it begins to kind of create a lizard formation where it looks like the bottom of your feet when you get wet, where it's like it starts to become harder to tattoo because it's actually fighting against me. And so the skin will actually engage with the tattoo artist, and because its job is to resist, but your brain is doing it willingly. So it's an interesting situation where you can sit with the organ and watch it react, but nobody's running away or being anesthetized or anything. And
So it's not an injection. You're burning the top layer, the epidermis. Is that what you said?
that top layer is a friction burn.
Yeah.
And it's being injected. I'm going to pull out the tool here shortly and show you exactly how deep I go and what the deal is. So I'm going to wash my hands. So just a side note, people come in here to be injured, but you never want them to leave with anything but the injury. So cleanliness is the highest order. And plastic is our friend. You'll see a lot of it come out, right? And but it's going to come out anyway. So it wants to coagulate. I want it to open up, but as soon as I want it to close, that's what I need it to do. So my technique is not to wash, but to, if she starts to bleed, which she will, I will just continue to pack the carbon into the wound and try to stem the blood that way. And it's a little unusual for artists to do that. Usually they'll wash to see if they have, full coverage. But I just go through and do the whole tattoo and keep it as dry as possible, and then wash when I absolutely have to. And by that time, the skin has coagulated and send in the rescue, I don't know what they're called, but the little things that get you coagulated. And the less blood, the less fluid coming out, the better, because I don't want to put the ink and then have the ink come out, right? So that would be a pain in the butt.
She was talking about platelets, if you remember.
Platelets,
Does
yes.
anyone remember what kind of feedback loop that is?
So can I just ask a question about what you
Positive
said? So
feedback.
you're saying that the
Increases the
technique that
production
you
of platelets.
use
contributes or reduces blood
wouldn't
flow
the action
on how
itself
you
be in there?
your
Yeah, because the carbon in the ink is
So
an
it's
actual
not based on the effect, it's based off of
product,
what
right?
the
It's
Okay.
actual mass.
So that's
Okay.
what matters.
And like imagine if you
Okay.
scratched yourself and you were out in the woods at a campfire
Yeah,
and it was a pretty bad scratch and deep enough to go into your second layer,
yeah,
and then you were moving some ashy wood and, you know, rubbed it in, it would
okay.
stick, right?
Right,
And you would bleed less where that ash was, right? And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised.
Really?
I wouldn't be surprised if ash wasn't the first way to pack a wound, right? And the only reason, these are all speculative things that I think.
Right,
So
your
I'm not
educated
saying that-
observations,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not saying it's true.
Ash was indeed one of the original ways of treating wounds, actually.
Was it? Okay.
They'd use salt as well, which you can imagine
Would hurt.
That would hurt, like-
but they would
It
combine
cauterizes it.
ash and salt and put that in the wound, which would
Cauterize.
it would do its job.
Right. So ash is pure, right? Because there's like everything's been burned out, and it's just the carbon left of the product of the wood. So, and if you see in ancient, like if you see photographs of tattoos from ancient times, they basically would do dots in places that they were, you know, had issues like lower back, ankles, knees.
You guys see?
Yeah, turn way up.
Wait.
Way up, hear that? Before I put. She's still learning, that's why her tattoo looks like this, but you can tell she's moving quickly into professionalism. She's gonna tattoo herself for you too, so you can see what it looks like when someone is searching for that right place to be.
Where's it gonna be?
I'm gonna put it where, what do you mean?
Where's the tattoo gonna be?
Well, I'm just gonna fill
Oh,
in
you're
the
filling
black.
in
So
that.
you can
Oh,
see,
okay.
anybody can come over if you'd like. See how her line work's real sketchy?
Yeah.
But that's like her first time trying, right? And then I had her try different shade needles, and this is her trying. So I'm gonna come in here and show her what it feels like in this area. She has been washed and sterilized. So I'm coming in, so you didn't see that, but that's what happens. Total sterilization. Anything that's on the skin, any bacteria that's on the skin, I can perforate it into there and she can get an infection. If she's sweaty and I perforate her skin, she can get an infection from the sweat. So it's pretty serious. I'm gonna come up here. This is like a flat little brush. It has 7 little tiny needles.
You guys can
And you
circle
guys-
around.
Yeah, you should look to see how far it comes out.
You guys can get way over here.
So for everybody it's different. She's very thin, so I don't have to go in as deep because she doesn't have a lot of water retention. So it's coming out like, you know, 1/8 of an inch at the max. Her neck, what I showed her neck. When I did her neck, she doesn't have a lot of fat there either, but the neck, like I told you, is like not easy. It wants to resist. So you really have to try hard on places like this. This area is, you know, kind of built to take abuse as a human being. So it takes ink really well and easy. And if you need to get close to see what I'm doing, you're more than welcome. So, and it's just like using a fat or a thin Sharpie on a piece of paper in terms of how much space you take up. So I'm basically, when I'm teaching her, I'm a farmer and she also grew up on a farm, so I talk about the skin like it's agriculture, and I tell her this is like a hoe, right? So if you have like dry soil like we've had all summer where hard clay on top, but if you go ahead and put a hoe in, it's going to be soft underneath, right? So that's how the skin is. It's resistant on the top, but if you can get past that resistance, it's just like really soft. And that's the technique. That's why it's hard to become a tattoo artist because if you go deeper than that soft layer underneath and get into the fat, then you're gonna have blowouts, and blowouts are where if I go too deep, the ink can leak underneath that second layer and travel on the third layer, which is not pleasant. And now that you know that, you'll see it in people's tattoos. Like if someone has a bad tattoo and it has like a soft spot with like a splash look. So you can see I have that almost filled all the way, but there's places I missed, and that you can tell that, like if I was to leave this alone in that middle area that's not filled, that skin will just come right off and there won't be any ink.
What's the like pain level on like getting a tattoo on your upper forearm?
On your
Like
upper
the
forearm,
inside, like right here.
that's actually a pretty easygoing spot because it's easy to tattoo there because it's flat and it's not fatty. So I think that the amount of time is really what it's all about, right? So if a tattoo is on an easy spot and the tattoo artist can go quickly, it ends up being endurance. So if you have a tattoo that's like 20 minutes long, you can get one anywhere, you know, because it's only 20 minutes. But about an hour and a half in, you start to complain. So I'm not going very deep at all. And I have to, if I was to go straight down like that, I would go too deep. It would be a disaster. So I'm like petting her skin. At a certain point, I'm gonna let it wear out, the ink, so you can see how she will start to leak platelets and a little bit of blood. It's really hard to see. I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it too.
It's bubbling up. And that's actually the beginning of the instinct to scab. Like if I was to just leave this alone and she'd walk out, in about 20 minutes, those little blood clots would be little hard balls because the body's job is to keep bacteria out. And it wants to do that, you know, as quickly as possible.
Would that hurt the tattoo?
If she was to walk out like that? No, it's actually, but what would happen is that it's way easier for bacteria to attach to a wet surface than a dry surface. So it is an enemy to the tattoo. That's how it would hurt the tattoo. But for the tattoo to leak out, not generally. I mean, the first day or two, it's going to leak a little platelets and blood and just that, I don't know what you would call it, plasma, juiciness. Sometimes people don't. It depends. The angrier the skin is, the more it's going to spit up stuff. And eventually the ideal is it builds up a hard scab, and that scab becomes its own protective layer. Okay, I'm going to drag this along. You'll be able to see how, as I run out of ink, it gets replaced with her own fluid. Because that looks like it's just pure ink, but there's fluid also there. Look at that cool line.
You can get closer.
Yeah, so there's a liner needle and this is a shader needle. And like nobody would actually get tattoos like this, but I wish they would because it looks so cool.
I always thought tattoos were more like a needle.
Well, there are apparently there are some.
Well, yeah.
It looks really cool at first, but when it heals up, it looks like a mistake. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm just dragging this along to show you as the ink goes away. Now we're getting to the point where the needle's pretty good. When you become an apprentice is you tattoo yourself, and if you can reach and still do a good job in that situation, then you can do anybody. And that's the idea. Now watch how lightly she'll go in at first, because you know everybody's a little bit nervous at first, especially when you're doing yourself. And she's not shy, so if you want to get closer and get a good look or take photographs of what it looks like, I recommend that everyone go and look at magnified and slow motion tattoos on YouTube. It's
I've
basically,
seen some slow-mo videos, it's scary.
yeah, it's basically like the needles are bouncing on a trampoline of flesh.
My
And-
sister, I've wanted a tattoo for like a while. My sister would always show me this slow-mo up close to like staring at it.
It's really an amazing one. There's an amazing video, like an early online video from like 12 years ago of an 18-year-old getting his first tattoo and his mom's sitting there and he's had it. He's like, ow, ow, ow. And then the guy's like, we're almost done, just a second. And he's like, starts screaming at him and like throwing the F-bomb and just runs out the door and their mom's like, ah. It's awesome. So line work is really easy to do, and well, it's not easy to make a perfect line, but line work is easier because it's basically like a razor blade going through the skin, right? And anybody can like pull a razor blade through the skin. Shading is different because it's like a rototiller. So. I don't know how many farmers are here, but a rototiller is this like really awesome thing that tears the ground up. So when Megan was finishing her hand tattoo, it was taking her a long time. Like she was at it an hour, so I went over to see what was going on, and I took over, and she said, oh, it felt a lot better when I was doing it. So what she was doing is going too light, right? But by going too light, she was traumatizing her hand, and it was swelling up. And it's hard to put ink into a swollen skin, right? So the idea is to like keep the skin as least traumatized as long as possible. So technique is huge. Like, you know, you don't want to go in there and drive it in right away real fast and blow it up, and because even if you blow up a little area, that inflammation is going to continue throughout the tattoo. And it's almost like once you start to kind of beat the skin up, instead of going real gentle, like the body knows, and it starts to send in its emergency resistors, and it doesn't matter where you work on the tattoo, it's as if you're working on that spot that's really angry. And about 3 hours in, usually people's brain is tapped out, but the skin says that it's tapped out. So you can be working in one spot like she is, and something that you worked on 3 hours prior will start to leak plasma and become a problem when it wasn't, you know, even 20 minutes ago. So the organ is reacting in all kinds of ways. Also, you can tattoo someone's wrist and they'll feel it in their chest. You know, the way if you look, I'm sure, have you guys done the nerves yet, the nervous system? How it's like a tree.
Yeah.
So, places that, you know, if you get cut and die, like your neck and your wrist, you know, up to here, so this zone, and the jugular vein, any of that, you start to tattoo it, people can get emotional, edgy, more annoyed than they would be if it was any other part of their body, and that's partly because you're triggering their, I mean, like I said, I could be making this up, but there's a life and death kind of relationship to that, but you're also aware that you're doing it to yourself, so it's a little bit of a mind game.
Well, these discussions are good because part of the class is to come up with research questions. Complication.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard about this, and you're going through an MRI with carbon in you.
Right.
It could.
I have heard something, but
Actually-
I have several clients that do have MRIs all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it may, they just adjust.
Yeah. I heard I think books that it cause burns in an MRI.
Oh, that's so interesting. I wouldn't be surprised.
Is getting something like this big on your front, how long would that take?
It's like an hour and a half.
Let's just hypothetically say that someone was turning 18 soon and had plans to get a tattoo soon. Well, downsize in that location.
Yeah, I love this. Is like future clientele. I love it. Yeah, about an hour and a half, unless it's real simple and then it can be under an
It's
hour.
not like not very shady or anything.
Yeah, so anywhere between, I've done things that big in a half hour, but you pay for an hour no matter what. But usually an hour.
How much is that for
An hour is 200 with tax. But
So,
if it's super simple.
shall
then
we
you pay
schedule you now?
When's your birthday? You
November
put
8th.
it on the calendar. November 8th. Oh my
Wow,
God,
it's
it really is.
Paris is perfect. You can take your task, your final
Right.
Yeah.
His final exam can be a tattoo. Just,
Why don't you guys
if your parents aren't into it, just tell them you got it in Seattle. They don't beat me up.
Well, I will say that the parents that did each other were pretty excited about it.
Okay. Yeah, I had one girl, I was like, I knew her mom would beat me up, and I said, you gotta tell her you got it in Seattle. She goes, oh, I already did.
So what's the uptick in tattoo interest? I mean, like I know,
Yeah.
here's a marketing
It's
thing. When
explosive.
you put a tattoo from Tracy's shop online in Google, it gets 3,000 hits, right?
People love
Which means
tattoos.
people are looking at tattoos, whether they're doing it is another, but it feels to me as a human like tattoos have exploded.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually reading an article this morning about a shop in Hong Kong. So they're a little more against tattoos still in China,
Yeah.
in Hong Kong. But the guy was saying that they doubled the amount of tattoos they do in a year. So
Wow.
yeah, it's become a really lucrative business.
But it's also like, it's because people are trying to find themselves.
Huh.
And I think that, technology has made everybody disembodied. Little brains floating around the universe. And people want to find their bodies.
Yeah, you're bringing a bit of the universe back to them in a sense.
Do you get a lot of people wanting to do like patchwork? Because I've been seeing a lot of people on there
Yeah.
doing like patchwork.
Yeah.
What's patchwork?
It's where you just it's like you put stickers on your body.
Oh, random
It's
stuff.
like your bumper stickers
Oh.
for your car.
Like
So
a suitcase of your life.
Yeah, I'll put a picture of it.
It's like BI.
we've got electives today in a short lunch, so unfortunately we have to go.
Oh, boo for the
But
electives
thank
for
you
lunch.
so much. This was perfect. Thank you for inviting us all.
Cool.
in.
Just
And
like
if your
random
mom wants to
different-
buy a shirt, I'm selling these now.
Right, instead of like a big epic thing.
Instead of like a sleeve, it's like
That it tends to cause more inflammation if you don't go deep enough.
Right, so when she was working on her hand, she was like zzz, 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 but for an hour. So like
Yeah.
if I was to sit there and take a, just a building nail and scratch on your arm for an hour, doesn't matter if I'm scratching lightly, an hour later it's gonna be like, what are you doing, dude? You know what I mean?
But would it not be like that if it was deep enough then?
Yeah, so if you perforate,
Why?
because the body doesn't have time to send in the troops, right?
Well, and we briefly looked at, and I don't fully know, I think when you look at the different types of nerves and the different layers, right? So you're probably just engaging a different group of nerves. You're going to keep irritating those nerves that are responsible for that light touch versus the ones that you just bypass.
So then it makes the top surface easy to get through versus, okay.
I think so.
Well, I think, the body's responding to the harm, right? But it's like length of time is harm, no matter what you're doing, right? Like the brain is gonna just be like, this is wrong. No one puts up with this kind of pain willingly, so the body's gonna be like, this is unusual, make it stop. And to make it stop, they're gonna pop up and resist. I'm talking metaphor too much, but I don't know how to do it otherwise.
Good. Well, so we've got a little bit more time.
Yeah, ask questions.
I know you said something about not knowing a ton about the biology of it, but one thing I was wondering was because of the way ink will stay in terms of the white blood cells actively, consistently going to keep the ink there. I think one thing I thought of a possibility is that if there's a possibility of that actually slightly weakening your immune system because of the
That's a good
consistent.
question. So the first tattoo, people tend to get a little bit of a weakened immune system. They could get a cold, or just feel like shit for a day. But then what happens is that if you get another tattoo, then your immune, and this has been scientifically proven, the tattoos boost your immune system, because once your body knows that this is happening, you come in again and it's like, oh yeah, I got a boost off of this, now I'm gonna use it. So it tends, the irony is it tends to make you healthier. Part of the problem is that if you do your whole body, your skin basically breathes. And there's people who have tattooed their whole body, they drop dead because they couldn't breathe anymore. So it's not fun and games.
Yeah, so does it affect perspiration?
Oh yeah, nothing. Yeah, so like it's just basically, you got the carbon packed in there, and you can breathe okay, but you're probably breathing around the tattoos, not where the tattoo is.
Yeah.
So I always design tattoos with a lot of white space,
Sure.
and I tend not to do, ton of black.
Maybe why you don't see a lot of tattooed marathon runners.
Probably, yeah. Can't sweat, right?
How long does it take to do like a full sleeve tattoo?
It depends on the detail.